man, ask those questions, because I think part of the idea of Bible basics is I want to stop you from having these stumbling blocks in your faith. When you come to these points in these chapters in these Bibles, when you begin to read it and it doesn't make sense to you, or it seems to go kind of opposite of what you believe, you need to ask questions. You need to ask people. You need to get on the internet and find out what all these different pastors have to say about it so you can understand it better. So again, you don't have these stumbling blocks in your faith. So let's go back to the idea of polygamy. So from the outside in, it looks like God is okay with it because he never really says anything negative about it. Again, it's the fathers of our faith. So many of them in the Old Testament have many, many wives. But part of the reason is because the time that they live in, they were surrounded by all these pagans. And that's exactly what the pagans did. They had lots and lots of wives. And the reason they had lots of wives is because they wanted many, many children. A lot of who you were was determined by how many children you had, especially how many boys you had. So the more wives you had, the more children that you can have. And so that's why a lot of these people still followed along in the same paths as the people that were around them. And this whole idea of these pagan people affecting God's people was a big deal to God. In fact, we'll read later whenever Moses and Joshua start to go in and we start having these battles where they start going in and clearing out the land where they're going to be settled at, God would have them go in and he would have them kill every single man, woman, and child in these areas because he did not want them to intermarry with them, because his whole idea at this time was to protect this entire lineage. And he knew that if they would begin to intermarry with other pagan religions, that they would begin to pick up their religions. A perfect example we just talked about on Sunday is Solomon. Solomon had almost 700 wives, and a lot of he was drug astray because of these religions and stuff from some of these wives and concubines that he had. It's crazy that they would marry all these, because I think to myself, like, I love my wife to death, but to have more than one wife, like, how in the world can you possibly keep up with just one? I mean, my goodness gracious, it just seems like it would just be, absolutely not worth whatever you're trying to get out of having more kids. And the other thing is that throughout the Bible, when you see these situations where you have polygamy going on, there's always something negative that's going on within the families. Many times you have the two wives that are at odds with each other. With Rachel and Leah, they hated each other. They just absolutely could not stand each other because of the jealousy that existed between the two. You have the example of David when he had multiple kids with multiple wives. You had one of the half-brothers that actually raped one of the half-sisters. And these stories can go on and on and on. So there's so many negative things that come out of this. And again, God never condones it. So let's look and let's try to see a scripture that actually gives what God's heart is on the idea of marriage or polygamy. We're going to read in Genesis 2, 22 through 24. Then the Lord made a woman of the rib, and he brought her to the man. At last, the man exclaimed, "This one is bone from my bone and flesh from my flesh. She will be called woman because she was taken from man." This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united as one. Again, the two become one, not the 2, 3, 4, 5 become one. It's the two become one. That is what God's idea of marriage is. It's simply one man and one woman brought together in holy matrimony. There is no other view of what God has on marriage. Let's move ahead to Genesis 37, 3 through 4. We'll catch back up with Joseph again. So Jacob loved Joseph more than any of the other children because Joseph had been born to him at an old age. So one day Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. Now, there's many translations that talk about this robe, and it's given a lot of different ways. One of the ones that talks about is being colorful. One of them just calls it beautiful, and another one just means it's long sleeve. We even see a lot of plays and musicals that are written about this multicolored coat. But in reality, the scholars aren't really sure what this actually means. The reason being is whenever they go through to translating Hebrew, they take that word and they find it all the way throughout the Bible. So let's say there's 10, 12 different times this word is actually used in the Bible. And so they'll look at the context of that and put them all together, and that way it can help them to shape what the definition is of the word. But this word only exists one time throughout the entire Bible to describe this coat. There's no other time that it's described. So we don't know exactly what it means. Now, is that relevant to anything? Absolutely not. I just thought that was kind of interesting. So here we go. Jacob is going to take this coat and he's put it on Joseph, and now his 11 brothers are having to sit there and actually watch this happen. So again, this hatred for Joseph is just going to continue just to boil and boil and boil. Genesis 37, 5 through 7. One night Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Listen to this dream, he said. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before me. So we can probably assume at this point Joseph is not the smartest guy in the world. Or perhaps he just likes to be beat up by his older brothers. Why else would he say this? So, here he is. He's like, all right, brothers. Okay, I had this dream. You're not going to believe this. We were out, and we were picking grain, and we were all bundling it up, and you had your bundle, and you had your bundle, and you had your bundle, and I had my bundle, and then my bundle, it began to raise up in the air. And then all of your bundles came to me, and they bowed down low to my bundle. Like, he already knows his brothers absolutely hate him. Why in the world does he keep poking the bear with a stick? Genesis 37, 8. His brothers responded, so you think you'll be our king? Do you actually think you will reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way that he talked about them. Now, the brothers already believed, because of the things that Jacob had done, that this is what Jacob wanted. That Jacob wants Joseph to be the person that he gives all of his things to. That he's going to be the one that's going to be over all of his brothers. They know this is what Jacob's doing, but to see it to be in action, for him to make a special coat just for Joseph and for none of the other boys, it just... at that point, they are playing over in their heads all different types of ways that they can kill him because they've just absolutely had enough. Or have they? Genesis 37, 9. Soon Joseph had another dream. And again, he told his brothers about it. Listen, I have had a dream. Oh, my goodness gracious. What his brothers must think now. Oh, great, he's got another dream. What is this one going to be about? The sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down before me. Oh, this kid, he's got some kind of crazy death wish as he just continued to antagonize his brothers. Fine, God gives you a dream that you think is actually going to come true, but there's no point in trying to lord this over other people. He gave this to you, not to something to use as a weapon or a tool to try to get under other people's skin. In Genesis 37, 10 through 11, this time he told a dream to his father. Oh, good. Now he's made his brothers mad. Let's make your dad mad also. As well as to his brothers, but his father scolded him. What kind of dream is this, he asked. Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you? But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dream meant. So it's interesting that Jacob scolds his son for saying this. But then after he has a little bit of time to think, he begins to realize there must be something to this dream. Now, Jacob had obviously experienced many dreams before this, of things that God had put on his heart that actually came to fruition. He saw the same thing with his father. Dreams would happen. So he knew dreams actually meant something. And so he knows there's got to be something absolutely going on here. We'll read later on, but we come to find out that Joseph ends up being taken into Egypt. And when he's taken into Egypt, he's basically sold as a slave. He has to go through all these horrible things. He's put in prison. He just does all these things keep happening to him. Even though he stays focused on God the whole time, all these things keep happening, but they all are happening for a reason. And what happens is you have this horrible famine that happens in the land. And at this point, Joseph, because of God, has been moved up to be second in command under Pharaoh. And so he's the one that's basically in control of everything. And God has told him that there's going to be this massive famine in the land and that you need to take all this grain and stuff and put it away so that you have food. Well, sure enough, this massive famine comes, and people throughout this entire area are absolutely starving to death because no one knew this thing would ever last this long. But because of Joseph because of God speaking to him, he took all this grain and put it all away. Well, now we have Joseph's family. They're still back in Canaan, and of course, the dad at this point thinks that he thinks that Joseph is actually dead at this point. So he ends up having to send his sons to Egypt because he finds out they're the only ones that have any food whatsoever. So he sends them to Egypt to get some food, and the first person they run into to ask for food is actually Joseph, but they don't even have any idea that it's Joseph because he's got all his Egyptian makeup and stuff on. Well, Joseph immediately recognizes them, and they end up having to bow down to Joseph at this point, and because they're basically begging and stuff that you'll sell us some food so that we can go back and save our family. And so we see right here that this dream and stuff that God had given him actually does come into fruition. It actually does happen in Joseph's life. Now in Genesis 37, 12 through 13, soon after this, Joseph's brothers went to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. When they had been gone for some time, Jacob said to Joseph, "Your brothers are pasturing the sheep at Shechem. Get ready, and I will send you to them." "I'm ready to go," Joseph replied. Now, it's interesting that they choose to go to Shechem. From where they're at, it's about a 50-mile trip to actually get to Shechem. And so, 50 miles in a car is like an hour. So if you're walking and you're taking sheep, it probably takes 2 weeks to get 50 miles. So why in the world do they want to travel someplace that's so far away? Well, probably they've had so much of Joseph, they and their father, they just want to get away for like a month. They just want to be away from all of this that's going on. So that's probably why they took this real long trip, so that they could just enjoy being with each other and not have to worry about Joseph anymore, and not having to worry about the way Jacob actually treats them. Genesis 37, 14 through 17. Go and see how your brothers and your flocks are getting along, Jacob said. Okay, here he is being sent to be the tattletale again. Then come back and bring me a report. So Jacob sent him on his way, and Joseph traveled to Shechem from their home into the valley of Hebron. When he arrived there, a man from the area noticed him wandering around the countryside. "What are you looking for?" he asked. "I'm looking for my brothers," Joseph replied. "Do you know where they are pasturing the sheep?" "Yes," the man said. "They have moved on from here, but I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph followed his brothers to Dothan and found them there. So here we have Joseph. He's made it to Shechem. He can't find his brothers. So you can imagine the first thing he does, he's going out in the pastures and he's trying to find some footprints or some sheep prints so he can see which direction they went so he can begin to follow them. And along comes this guy and sees Joseph with his head down on the ground looking around. And he asks him, "What the heck are you looking for?" He's like, "I'm trying to find my brothers. I don't know where they went. Do you know?" He says, "Yeah, they actually went to Dothan, I overheard." Well, Dothan is actually about 15 miles farther from where they're at now. So they're even traveling even farther to get away. But where Dothan is actually located, there is a place that gets named eventually called the Via Maris. The Via Maris is basically this roadway that if you were going to travel from the east to Egypt, this is where you would travel. So this was like a highway of the day. This is where all the people would travel when they would make their way to Egypt. Genesis 37, 18 through 19. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. "Here comes the dreamer," they said. "Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns. We can tell our father a wild animal has eaten him, then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." So his brothers obviously have not forgotten. This time they've had away has not had any time to really let them let go of it, because the second they see Joseph, the first thing they think is, how in the world are we going to kill him, because we've had it up to here with him. But you see through this that his brothers, they're trying to thwart the plans of God. They see this, they know this is what's supposed to happen, but they're trying to stand in the way of what God has planned. But God has another plan. Genesis 37, 20 through 28. But when Reuben heard of their scheme, he came to Joseph's rescue. "Let's not kill him," he said. "Why should we shed blood? Let's just throw him into an empty cistern here in the wilderness. Then he'll die without us laying a hand on him." Now Reuben was secretly planning to rescue Joseph and return him to his father. So when Joseph arrived, his brothers ripped off the beautiful robe he was wearing. Then they grabbed him and threw him into the an internet business. And in the middle of losing this business, all I could see was the tornado of fear and desperation around me. I couldn't see past that. And I would begin to pray to God, fix this now. That's all I wanted. But it wasn't until almost 5 years later when I look back on it and I could see God's hand in the midst of all of it. And he was trying to shape me, and he was trying to pull me from this area to get me over here to this area, because he had so many more blessings for me. So it's so cool to be able to look back and to actually see how God worked. And sometimes it takes so much time for us to see this. And I know you guys, open to why God was doing that and why God brought you to that place that he was taking you to. Love to hear from you guys about that. Let's go ahead and move to Genesis 39, 6 through 7. So Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibility over everything he owned. With Joseph there, he didn't worry about a single thing except what kind of food to eat. Joseph was a very handsome and well-built young man, and Potiphar's wife soon began to look at him lustfully. "Come and sleep with me," she demanded. So again, Potiphar, the only thing he has to worry about is food. And Potiphar was a very important man. And being an important man, he probably was gone a lot. He was always having to be at the palace to take care of his men. So he was probably not at the house very much at all. And so his wife was probably left alone a lot, and Joseph was always there. And Potiphar, being an extremely powerful man, he was probably married to a really, really good-looking woman, because he probably had the pick of anybody he wanted, and she was probably much, much younger than him. So here we have a woman here that's being left alone all the time, probably in the middle of, she's sexually driven, and she hardly ever has her husband there. And so she sees this beautiful person in Joseph, and so she begins to just go after him. You can only imagine she's coming out to him in these fancy silk gowns and dancing provocatively to him. And, all the thing that you women do whenever you want your husband to buy you a new purse. Oh, or is that just my wife? Oh, sorry. Now let's look at it from Joseph's side. He's in his 20s. He's right smack in the middle of his sexual prime. He's single and ready to mingle. Okay, he's not ready to mingle. He's just simply single. He's way over in another country. Again, 20 years old. I don't know about you, but I remember when I was 20 years old. When I was 20 years old, that was not who I was. All I could ever think about when I was that age was relations. That's all that ever went through my mind was relations. Right, dear? We started dating when she was about 17 and I was about 19. So we've been together for a long time. So I can make those kind of jokes, can I? No, not without embarrassing her. All right, these were all powerful temptations for a man that was far from home, and she's around every single day, just trying to arouse his passions. But Joseph held his ground, and he did not give in to these temptations. The Bible tells us that temptations are common to all of us. We each have in our flesh these areas of weaknesses. Mine's chocolate chip cookies. One person may be more apt to lie. Another person may be more apt to gamble or to steal. But temptations in many forms, they're all around us. And in the age that we live in, we're tempted almost every single minute, especially with these phones that we have in our hand. Now, Potiphar's wife, there's so many women that are just the same as her today. They're trying to drag men into sin. And it's just as bad on the other side. We have so many men that are also trying to drag good women into sin. It becomes just a game, just a challenge to the people of the world today. The idea of love, it just doesn't matter to anyone anymore. It's all about fulfilling sexual desires. Most people that get married now, they get married with this mindset that they're going to end up getting a divorce. They just think, oh, it's only going to last so long. So this idea of what a true love and what a true marriage is just almost a foreign thing in today's world. Genesis 39, 8 through 9. But Joseph refused. Look, he told her, my master trusts me with everything in his entire house. No one here has more authority than I do. He has held back nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How could I do such a wicked thing? It would be a great sin against God. It always helps when someone is trusting in you. He knows that God's behind him, and he knows that God is trusting in him. So it's a little bit easier to make the right decisions when you know you have that person that you're being accountable to. And Joseph also recognizes that he's special in God's eyes, that he knows that he cannot do such a wicked thing. He's a man of special privilege, and that he comes from a chosen family that's been protected by God for just an incredible purpose that he has for him. You and I, we're Joseph, and these are the things that we must look forward to whenever we have to deal with temptation. We are washed in the blood of Jesus. We are the children of God, and that we're set apart from the rest of this world. And our purpose is to glorify God in all that we do. These are the things that should rocket through our mind whenever we're faced with temptation. Joseph describes this as a wicked thing, the same as God sees it. We must remember that we are a child of God, and that everything we do, he's truly right there in the midst of us. If we're having an affair against our spouse, he's right there. If we're lying to our friends, he's right there. If we're cheating someone out of something, God is right there. Again, we're living in a culture where these things have been completely acceptable, and for most people, they're expected. But we are called to live above the world. We're called to live to a much higher standard. So stop seeing things in gray. We've got to see things how they truly are in black and in white. There is definitely a right and there is definitely a wrong, and God sees sin as sin. All right, you guys, do you have, if you have any questions, or do you guys have a testimony that you would like to share with us? If you do, please raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone around to you. Nobody? Yes, ma'am.
Well, you had mentioned about polygamy and, what was going on with the typical quote-unquote marital situation in that era. And also, the Hebrews did not have the Torah at this point. Mm-hmm. They didn't have the laws that Moses handed down, the 10 Commandments, the 613. They're in Leviticus, etc. So they didn't have the benefit of the law. And yet Joseph was so pure. And he said, I can't do this to God. So, I'm sure that there were, they talk about the different, I'm trying to think of, it's like the Noah laws. I can't think of the word mm-hmm. exactly, but they're like periods, like pre-flood, and then with Noah, and then government, and different eras in which there were laws that were created by man. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, I think God was the source before you got to the formal Mosaic law. So I think that was in operation. Abraham probably had raised his boys right.
Yeah.
But I felt that the fact that Joseph just had such a moral compass, it's really impressive.
Yes.
And he said, bottom line, I will not sin against God. So he was definitely plugged in that phase. Now, I know we had a series on Joseph, I think, and the implication was that Joseph was being molded, he was learning, he was being tested, he was growing. But at that stage, I think he was locked solidly on the target.
Yeah.
And he was in God's divine favor. And time after time, we see that God just came in and bailed him out. So that was just an observation that I had and something that I admire. Regarding the other thing, in terms of a testimony, mm-hmm. I'm going to be brutally honest. I was in like what I consider to be a prolonged battle for about 17 years. in the workplace. And I felt there is a purpose here. I'm still waiting for the purpose. I quit my job. When COVID raised its ugly head, I quit my job. So I still feel that there is a purpose, but I wasn't seeing it, and I was just burned out. I mean, I was at the point where I was going to lose my witness and do things that I couldn't, I just didn't have the strength anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt, well, you know, maybe that's why I'm to leave, because, you know, let God be strong. I don't have to be strong. And it's been wonderful, you know, a time of refreshing since I left, and the Lord has provided for me, so I'm not concerned about that. But I had certain things that I was sure the Lord was going to do, and I just needed to hold on and hang on and hold out, and it hasn't happened yet. I still believe it's going to happen, but I thought I'd share that.
That's awesome. I mean, even after 17 years, you're continuing with that, and that's, you know, that's an example that's continuing made through the Bible. As so many years can pass, but we expect these things to happen. Talk about Joseph. You know, we talked about before. I said how I love all these characters in the Bible because they're always such a mess, and I can always see myself through them. But you know what? I love Joseph and I love Daniel because they're two of the almost cut from the same cloth. They're just absolutely amazing people that can be such young in their 20s and teens and still continue to do the right thing and to be just so blessed by God and to continue to make the right decisions is just it absolutely astonishes me. I enjoy those two characters so much, not because I can relate to them, just because you know, it's something that you can really start to begin to strive for in your life.
That would be a good Bible study someday.
Anybody else?
One reason that you don't have as many questions is because you do a really good job of explaining everything.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
One question would be from the time, do you know how old Joseph was during this period?
He's about 20 before he gets to, when he ends up being the second in command of Potiphar, he's about in his 30s.
In his 30s, and then he gets thrown in prison.
No, that's before that. He's probably around 25 or so when he ends up in prison.
Okay. All right, and then this is kind of a question. Is there any way that you can let us know what we're going to be studying next? Like, you know how you're skipping a few chapters? Mm-hmm. If we knew what chapter where we were going to be focusing on, mm-hmm. I bet I could come up with something to stump you. Okay.
So what we'll do is whenever we send out the notifications for the next Bible Basics, we'll put on there whatever the chapter is and stuff that we're going to be doing. That way you guys can read it in advance. Will that work? Yeah, that'll work. Okay, cool. Anything else? All right, thank you guys so much. You guys are dismissed.